I'm pretty sure that I'm calling today's episode "The ESA is a Big Piece of Shit." I've not officially decided on the title yet, but I feel that's where I'm going. And YouTube's algorithm isn't going to like that. YouTube's algorithm doesn't like my show in general, so I've kind of really fucked myself over with all of my swearing and my rudeness and the fact that I'm just not marketable or watchable. So might as well just lean into it. Yeah, we'll call today's episode "The ESA is a Big Piece of Shit." It's true. I mean, that's the main thing. I'm right to say it. The Entertainment Software Association is the face of the mainstream video game industry, representing the interests of pretty much every player in the American market, including Electronic Arts, Take-Two, Ubisoft, and Warner Bros. Interactive. That alone is good reason to regard the ESA the same way you'd regard a plate of bacon-wrapped dog shit. The trade association, proudly boasting the motto, "We are the video game industry," looks after the interests of game publishers as a lobbyist, legal protector/attacker, and marketing interest. Founded in April 1994, what would become the ESA was birthed in no small part as a response to early video game violence scares, chiefly the by now quaint moral panic arising from Mortal Kombat and Night Trap. The hysteria reached such a point that US Congress hearings were had, with Nintendo and Sega blaming each other for inconsistent video game age ratings. Joe Lieberman proposed the government be in charge of rating games if the game industry couldn't agree to do it properly themselves. This led to the formation of the Interactive Digital Software Association, the IDSA, which in turn led to the creation of the Entertainment Software Ratings Board, the ESRB, which today handles age ratings on behalf of the video game industry and continues to rate games with paid gambling mechanics as suitable for children. The IDSA changed its name to the ESA in 2003. Information you don't need to know, but I put it in here because I did. For the most part, the ESA behaves like any other trade association, and it of course runs the Electronic Entertainment Expo, E3, a yearly celebration of corporate autofellatio in which game companies market their upcoming releases, make wild, ambitious promises they couldn't possibly keep, and ply game journalists with alcohol at shit parties. E3 is generally viewed as an exciting time of year by those less cynical than myself, and in years past it has generally served as the Super Bowl of video game advertising events, the place where new consoles are revealed and the biggest games are often seen for the first time. More and more, however, the importance of E3 has diminished to a point where, in my opinion, it's pretty much not needed for any reason other than tradition. As fewer game companies treat it as the major home of big announcements, E3 is only becoming more vestigial. Fan-focused events like PAX, as well as other trade fairs and events like Gamescom or the Tokyo Game Show, eat into E3's impact with their own increasing share of reveals and announcements. And each year now we get Jeff Keighley's The Game advertisements, a giant commercial masquerading as an award show for which many publishers have reserved their biggest news. More importantly, however, game companies are learning that they simply don't need an exterior show of any kind to reach their customers. Social media has changed the game in many industries, not always for the better, with Twitter giving companies a direct, instant line to their audience, and YouTube and Twitch TV offering massive exposure for the cost of making and streaming a video. The sheer expense and logistical hassle of E3 just ain't worth it. Nintendo was ahead of the curve on this one, shifting away from live press conferences and toward pre-made videos 8 years ago. The first Nintendo Direct was published on October of 2011 and has since become the primary way Nintendo communicates its announcements, shifting significantly away from traditional E3 presentations. Nintendo Directs air throughout the year using YouTube and Twitch to rustle up hype for its fans without the need to humiliate its executives on stage with Wii music demonstrations.
You can pluck.
Sony appears to be following suit, realizing that it can more efficiently and effectively communicate on its own terms. Sony uses its own annual event, the PlayStation Experience, to share big news for the platform, and this year it skipped out on E3, stating, "As the industry evolves, Sony Interactive Entertainment continues to look for inventive opportunities to engage the community. PlayStation fans mean the world to us, and we always want to innovate, think differently, and experiment with new ways to delight gamers. As a result, we have decided not to participate in E3 in 2019. We are exploring new and familiar ways to engage our community in 2019 and can't wait to share our plans with you." Sony now has its own Direct-esque broadcasts State of Play. Not to mention Microsoft's in on the action as well with Inside Xbox. This is not to say E3 has been wholesale abandoned. Yet. Microsoft still had a presser this year, joined by third-party presentations from Bethesda and EA, that sort of stuff, but E3's significance has been waning for years, and the ESA has noticed. In leaked discussions, the trade association's plans for E3 2020 have been unearthed, and to put this diplomatically, they sound fucking ghastly. In a move that seems just a little desperate, the ESA appears to be copying Gamescom in hopes of finding similar success. The rebrand would see E3 become a fan, media and influencer festival and would be far less about the press and more about public access. Opening it up is not exactly a terrible idea, since I found attending E3 to be a fairly awkward and inefficient way to work back when I did games journalism. You actually get a better idea of what's going on at E3 when you're not at E3. Unable as you are to see the woods for the trees, or in this particular case, the woods for the massive stinking crowds and shite Wi-Fi. It might as well just be a public-facing thing, but it's not the public access that's a problem. It's the way this festival is positioning itself to be pretty much a corporate propaganda event full to the brim with tacky bollocks. And when I say this, I mean even more than it usually is. Seeming to have noticed how successful Keanu Reeves' appearance at this year's Microsoft conference was, E3 is set to feature far more celebrity endorsements because, as we all know, if a thing is successful once, the best way to follow it up is to ignore any context for that thing's success and just try to cynically replicate it. Keanu Reeves worked because it was an unexpected appearance, and also everyone is in romantic love with Keanu Reeves. Oh, Keanu Reeves, I love you. I want to live with you in a mushroom house. A mushroom house. Chasing him up with celebrities just to do it again is going to be really gauche, and I imagine it's going to get fucking cringeworthy in short order. Historically, celebrity appearances and video game hype don't mesh together all that well. On top of that, E3 will lean on getting interest from influencers, because of course it fucking will. Influencers will likely not be paid the way celebs are, with mere attention or access being offered as compensation. In turn, the influencers would provide, and I quote, validation, attention, and excitement across media outlets beyond the video game space. This is basically some of the most late 2010s bullshit you could hope to see. And of course, one major benefit to having influencers is that they tend to be uncritical. They're there to say, hey, what up guys, into their phones, and just show content without critique. There's a reason why so many industries now favour influencers over journalists or critics. If they can get someone to just yell buzzwords and hype into a phone, well, that's pretty much the only thing game publishers have ever wanted. They've long since seen games media as just an extension of their marketing departments, but a lot of game journalism has grown up. The allure of access isn't enough to make them starry-eyed and uncritical anymore. These days, game journalism can produce powerful exposés on the dark side of the game industry, and game publishers don't have to risk that kind of, well, journalism from someone who just makes 30-second videos squeeing on Instagram. Now, I'm not saying all modern social media influencers are bad. What I am saying is that I'm old, they're new, so I don't like them. And then there's this disgusting slide, the power of social good. Research shows that millennials and Gen Z are the most giving /social good generations ever. By amplifying E3's social good brand, we can advance the industry's brand with consumers while storing positive chits for future use, e.g. policy goals next to negative video game story. Fuck off! Fuck you! What is that? Exploit charity and then lean back on it the next time you fuck up. Oh, AAA publishers have never preyed upon their audience. Look, we once gave money to cancer research. Fucking cynical fucks. This might be the most cynical part of the whole presentation. Typically, that's not what charity is supposed to be for, ESA. It's not supposed to be there for the video game industry to take advantage of the next time the game industry does something awful. Now, I'm not going to say it's evil to do good things just so that you can use those good things to excuse when you do bad things. But I will say that is exactly the kind of thing Lex Luthor does. You big piece of shit. An alarming phrase that comes up in the ESA's E3 2020 pitch is control content and the message. Control content and the message. And that is the driving force behind wanting to appeal to influencers and getting little media partnerships going so that they can control content and the message. Now, E3 has long been just one big corporate propaganda event, but it's very clear, it's very obvious that the ESA wants to turn E3 2020 into nothing but that. Sideline the press, sideline independent thought, focus on influencers who will say anything for access, media partnerships where people will say anything for money. Basically, with E3 2020, the ESA wants to... Actually, I couldn't say it better than they said it themselves. Control content and the message. In this new pitch, the LA Convention Center would be split into 8 distinct... experience hubs. Fuck's sake. If you look at the floor plan though, you will notice something pretty insightful. Stare at it long enough and you can make out how the map resembles a tubby little insect person with an inverted arrow for a penis. The trade association hopes to use E3 to create... exclusive appointment-only activations for select attendees who will create buzz and FOMO. Fucking hell. Basically excluding people to artificially generate value, the way Nintendo deliberately creates console shortages to raise interest in its hardware. FOMO, if you didn't know, is one of those horrifying psychological conditions worsened by today's social media culture. Standing for fear of missing out, FOMO is how we feel when we're not part of a big cultural discussion or event. Typically entertainment stuff like, say, Game of Thrones or a new Netflix special that everyone's talking about. Comic-Con does this as well with exclusive trailers or gameplay reveals that only those in attendance get to see at the time, and the rest of us are supposed to feel like schmucks, kicking ourselves for not being there in person to experience it in the moment. We actually have an entire Jimquisition about how it's used by the game industry for exploitative reasons, as corporations have quickly learned how to use our human need for inclusion against us, getting us to rush out and purchase and pre-order and buy to keep up with the societal Joneses. E3 2020 will allegedly expand to include 10,000 new attendees, which, nope. Just no. While I don't think opening it up to the public is necessarily a bad idea, I want no part of that, friend. I stopped going to E3 years ago, and even when it was just for press, the LA Convention Center wasn't big enough to house all of the sweaty, gruesome bodies. The lines were long, the crowds were impenetrable, and adding to that dog pile is my idea of the perfect fucking nightmare. But hey, if you do fear long lines, don't worry. The ESA will be right there to take advantage of, cynically utilize those waiting in line and captivated with nothing to do and nowhere to escape to. Introducing Cutainment, the most disgusting non-sexual word you'll hear today. Basically, while people are waiting in line to play games, they can be advertised to by companies. This will no doubt provide useful data for the proposed E3 app, which will track attendee behaviors. I am sure exploding the E3 population by 10,000 has nothing to do with the fact that increased wait lines will prime far more FOMO-fueled attendees to subject themselves to endless commercials. With all of these celebrity endorsements and influencer attention grabs, you might fear that disclosure will be an issue. But it's not like paid promotions on behalf of the ESA are shady or anything, unless they are. And they are. Rest assured they are. For example, the ESA funds segments on Tech Impact, a show which runs on CNBC and does not include anywhere in its programming that the game industry lobbyist pays it. E3 2020 will seek out more paid media partnerships similar to the Tech Impact bits, and I'm sure we can expect the same level of rigorous disclosure, i.e. a tiny note at the bottom of Tech Impact's bespoke website that simply reads sponsored program. All of this follows the post-E3 2019 disaster, where the Entertainment Software Association doxed thousands of this year's attendees in the stupidest, most incompetent way possible. It hosted the private data, including real names, addresses, and phone numbers of journalists, YouTubers, and analysts, on a completely unsecure webpage which was found and shared. You may have noticed I brought this story up a few times over the past few months, and will continue to do so every time I talk about the ESA because fuck 'em, irresponsible fuckwits. But in this particular video column, we should go into a little bit more detail. The ESA weakly attempted to chalk it up to a website vulnerability, but there was no vulnerability exploited. The information was literally sitting there, asking to be taken, not stolen, because nothing was hacked, nothing was broken into. It was there on an unsecure page to be taken and distributed, which it was, leading to many of the 2,000 plus victims getting harassed because our community is riddled with little fucking monsters. The ESA, quick as it is to defend the interests of multi-billion-dollar companies, proved woefully pathetic at protecting the safety of its E3 guests, and offered only pitiful excuses in response to directly harmful negligence that it could be and should be legally liable for. The ESA claimed this had never happened before, but it soon became clear that the inconceivable stupidity wasn't limited to 2019. Personal data from 2004 and 2009 attendees were uncovered as well, demonstrating this was no isolated incident. The year before, in 2018, the ESA had also failed to protect private data, and was even warned that its security was shockingly poor. Someone found the exposed data last year and wrote to the ESA in September of 2018 to warn them that their fucking WordPress was leaking data, and they were ignored. The ESA's claim that for more than 20 years this has never been an issue was demonstrably false. Poorly protected private information is an ongoing issue the ESA has been warned about and didn't take seriously. In short, the ESA's assertion this was an isolated incident is a fucking lie. If you're considering attending E3 2020 to satiate your FOMO and be influenced or Q-tained, then do bear that in mind. Do bear in mind that you'd be handing over private data to ignorant fucking idiots that can't be trusted with it, and that these maladroit lummoxes want even more private data, which they'll obtain using an app you're expected to use while waiting in line to play some overhyped video game you'll get to be disappointed by in a matter of months from the comfort of your own home anyway. The ESA will protect game publishers all day long, protect them from criticism and legislation, protect their so-called right to make money via predatory monetization, but they won't protect people attending E3, which has become an irrelevant part of the game industry's year and is now embarrassingly scrabbling for a sense of relevance. The ESA is basically a big piece of shit. So this installment of the Jimquisition was originally going to be a more broad list of the ESA's transgressions, but the E3 2020 pitch was so awful that that kind of took dominance. So I won't do that because it just needed tearing into the whole thing. So what I will do is I will leave you, I've told this story here and there before, but it is, for me, a major turning point in my career. It's what really, it was probably the biggest contributing factor to me being the cynical, embittered, pathetic wretch you see before you. But basically, the ESA in, I believe, the mid to late 2000s started up the Video Game Voters Network. Now, this was basically glorified astroturfing. It's positioned as a grassroots activist movement to mobilize gamers who can vote so that they can indeed vote. in the interests of the video game industry. Typically, this sort of thing is about like legislation about violent video games. Back when Leland Yee was pushing that and Arnold Schwarzenegger were pushing to legislate video games based on violent content, and Jack Thompson was running around doing his Jack Thompson thing. So the ESA set this up, and that was all well and good, I guess, until SOPA and PIPA rolled around. Now, if you don't remember what those bills were, that was an attempt to get into law basically very sweeping, broadly written, very worrying anti-piracy and anti-copyright infringement measures. That's what it was on paper, but when you looked at it, it was actually quite worrying indeed. There was a major protest across the internet. A lot of websites, I was a member of some websites that blacked out on a given day to show you, in a fairly dramatic turn, what the internet may look like if this was signed in. Anyway, the ESA backed that. They saw SOPA and PIPA, they saw how overreaching it was, they saw how many websites, not just little websites, you know, up to and including things like Wikipedia, saw it as basically giving corporations one of those blackout pens that they could just scribble all over the internet with, very much like the video game Hypnospace Outlaw, but real. And the ESA saw that and thought, yep, checks out, we're on board with that, we're fine with that. And they backed it up. And remember, the ESA represents, or they say themselves, we are the video game industry. So the video game industry, after trying to get us to vote for their rights, to get us to mobilise in a grassroots fashion as part of the Video Game Voters Network, basically they wanted us to look out for them. But when the time came for them to look out for us, they said, fuck you. And that was pretty much the pinpoint moment where I'm like, okay, you're a big piece of shit. You're a treacherous, two-faced, hypocritical, backstabbing piece of shit, ESA. Eventually, they would rescind, they would back away from supporting SOPA and PIPA after it became obvious that it would be defeated. Once it became very apparent, once it was basically defeated, once SOPA and PIPA basically were done, and it was clear it was going nowhere, then the ESA came out and said, you know what, we don't think that's good. They thought it was perfectly fine up until it was clear it was over, and then they tried to reverse course for brownie points, which they didn't get because everyone at the time could see fucking through it. But that's your ESA. That's your ESA. Opportunistic, treacherous scumbags. And that is why the ESA is a big bag of shit, and why you can thank God for me.
You can pluck.